My name is Hazel, and I'm 58 years old. I've always loved creating things with my hands, especially knitting. For my niece Emily's graduation, I spent hundreds of hours making a handmade family heirloom quilt, each stitch filled with memories and love. I was so excited to give it to her at her graduation party, but when she opened it, she looked at her friends and said, "A cheap handmade blanket." Really? Her words cut through me like a knife. In that moment, I made a decision about the $75,000 college fund I'd been saving for her since the day she was born. Before I continue with my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Trust me, this story about the true value of appreciation might make you think twice about the gifts you give to the people in your life. I've lived alone since my husband Robert passed away 11 years ago. We never had children of our own, which is perhaps why I poured so much love and attention into my niece Emily over the years. After retiring from my 30-year career as an accountant at a small local firm, I found joy in the simple pleasures of life, particularly in creating things with my hands. My younger sister Sarah and I have always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, there was a constant underlying competition between us that I never quite understood. I was 4 years older, quieter, more practical, while Sarah was vivacious, popular, and always wanted more than our middle-class upbringing provided. She married Jeffrey, a successful real estate developer, when she was 25, and they quickly ascended into a lifestyle of luxury that seemed worlds away from my modest existence. When Emily was born 18 years ago, I fell in love with her instantly. She had these curious blue eyes that seemed to take in everything, tiny fingers that would wrap around mine with surprising strength. I was there in the hospital the day she was born, and I made a promise to myself that I would always be there for her, a steady presence in her life. "I want you to be her godmother," Sarah had said, surprising me as she cradled her newborn daughter. "Are you sure?" I had asked, touched by the gesture that seemed to bridge the distance that had grown between us over the years. "Of course. You're so responsible, Hazel. I know you'll always look out for her." And I did. From that day forward, I started a special savings account that would one day fund Emily's college education. Each month I would deposit whatever I could spare, sometimes forgoing small luxuries or needs of my own, to ensure the fund grew steadily. By her high school graduation, I had managed to save $75,000, a sum that represented countless small sacrifices over 18 years. In the early years, Emily and I had a beautiful relationship. I would babysit her while Sarah and Jeffrey attended their social functions, reading her stories, teaching her simple knitting stitches, baking cookies together. She was a bright, affectionate child who seemed genuinely happy in my company. "Auntie Hazel, can we make the star cookies today?" she would ask, her small face alight with excitement. "Of course, sweetheart. And maybe afterward, we can work on your knitting. You were doing so well with the basic stitch last time." As Emily grew older, however, I noticed subtle changes in her. The influence of her parents' wealthy lifestyle began to shape her personality in ways that concerned me. Designer clothes became important to her by the time she was 12. By 14, she was comparing electronic devices and cars, speaking with the casual entitlement of someone who had never known financial constraint. "Mom says we're going to Paris for spring break," she told me during one visit when she was 15, barely looking up from her phone. "Dad's getting me the new iPhone before we go, thank goodness. This one is so last year." I nodded and smiled, though my heart ached a little at how different she seemed from the little girl who had once been content with homemade cookies and craft projects. Still, I reminded myself that all teenagers go through phases, and beneath the materialism, surely the sweet child I adored was still there. Sarah encouraged Emily's preoccupation with status and material possessions. "My daughter deserves the best," she would say, shooting me a look that somehow implied I wouldn't understand. We want her to fit in with the right crowd. The right crowd, as it turned out, consisted of the children of other wealthy families who attended the prestigious private school where Sarah and Jeffrey had enrolled Emily. These were kids who received cars on their 16th birthdays, who vacationed in exotic locations during school breaks, who spoke casually about their parents' vacation homes and country club memberships. Despite these changes, I never wavered in my commitment to Emily's future. I continued adding to her college fund, even taking on freelance bookkeeping work after retirement, to contribute a bit more. I lived frugally in the same small 3-bedroom house Robert and I had purchased 30 years ago, drove a reliable but aging car, and found joy in simple pleasures rather than expensive indulgences. My knitting became more than just a hobby during these years. After Robert died, I had turned to it as a form of therapy, finding comfort in the rhythmic movement of the needles, the gradual creation of something beautiful from a simple strand of yarn. Over time, I developed considerable skill, even selling some of my creations at local craft fairs and on small online platforms to supplement my retirement income. The money I earned from selling my knitted items went almost entirely into Emily's college fund. There was something poetic about it, I thought, using the work of my hands to secure my niece's future. Even as Emily grew more distant during her teen years, canceling our planned visits in favor of activities with her friends, responding to my texts with increasingly brief replies, I never considered abandoning my commitment to her education. I remember one particular visit when Emily was 16. She had reluctantly agreed to have lunch with me at a cafe near her school. She spent most of the hour on her phone, occasionally looking up to offer monosyllabic responses to my questions about her classes and activities. "I'm thinking about making you something special for your graduation when the time comes," I said, trying to find some way to connect with her. "Maybe a quilt or a special sweater. Something you can take to college with you." She glanced up briefly. "That's okay, Aunt Hazel. You don't have to make me anything. But I'd like to. Something with special meaning, something that would last." Emily gave me a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sure, whatever you want. But honestly, I'd rather just get something from a store you know, like normal stuff." The comment stung, but I brushed it aside. She was a teenager after all, and teenagers weren't known for their tact or appreciation of sentimental gestures. Surely, by her graduation, she would have matured enough to value a heartfelt gift. As her high school years progressed, the distance between us grew. Sarah would occasionally send me photos of family vacations to the Bahamas or skiing trips in Aspen. Emily's prom in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension, her acceptance to various prestigious universities. I was included in family events on major holidays, but always felt slightly out of place in Sarah and Jeffrey's expansive, perfectly decorated home among guests who discussed country club memberships and investment properties. Through it all, I held on to the hope that Emily would eventually outgrow this phase, that the values I had tried to instill during those early years would someday resurface. And I continued to add to her college fund month after month, looking forward to the day when I could present her with not only a handmade gift from the heart, but also the means to pursue her dreams without financial burden. Little did I know that the moment I had anticipated for 18 years would unfold in a way I never could have imagined. The idea for Emily's special graduation gift came to me nearly 2 years before the actual event. I was sorting through some old family items in my attic when I came across a quilt my grandmother had made for me when I graduated high school. The colors had faded somewhat over the decades, but the intricate pattern and careful stitching still told a story of love and dedication. Running my fingers over the delicate handiwork, I remembered how much that quilt had meant to me during my college years. It had been a piece of home in my stark dorm room, a tangible reminder of my grandmother's love during homesick nights and stressful exam periods. Even now, there was something deeply comforting about the knowledge that each stitch had been placed with care by someone who loved me. This is what I'll make for Emily, I decided in that moment. Not just any quilt, but a true heirloom piece that would tell the story of her life and our family history, something she could cherish forever, and perhaps even pass down to her own children someday. I began researching quilt patterns, immediately looking for something that would be both beautiful and meaningful. After weeks of consideration, I settled on a modified cathedral window pattern that would allow me to incorporate special fabrics and symbols in each window. This was not a beginner's project by any means. The pattern I chose was intricate and challenging, requiring precision and patience, but I was determined to create something extraordinary. The next decision was selecting the materials. I wanted nothing but the finest quality for Emily's quilt. I spent days visiting specialty fabric shops, ordering samples online, and comparing different weights and textures of cotton and silk. This would not be an inexpensive project, I realized, as I selected premium materials that would stand the test of time. All told, I spent over $800 on fabric and supplies, a significant expense on my limited retirement income, but I considered it an investment in a priceless gift. For the special fabric pieces that would be featured in each window of the quilt, I gathered materials with significant meaning. I used a small piece of lace from my mother's wedding dress, a swatch of the baby blanket I had knitted when Emily was born, a bit of fabric from the costume she had worn as the lead in her elementary school play, and dozens of other meaningful scraps I had saved over the years. With all my materials gathered, I set up a dedicated workspace in my spare bedroom and began the painstaking process of creating the quilt. Each day, I would spend 3 to 4 hours cutting, piecing, and stitching, often working until my fingers grew stiff and my eyes tired. I developed a routine, working in the mornings when my mind was sharpest, taking breaks to rest my hands when needed, and keeping meticulous notes about my progress. The work was challenging, but deeply satisfying. As the quilt took shape under my hands, I found myself reflecting on Emily's life and our relationship, remembering the sweet little girl who had once followed me around my kitchen, eager to help with whatever I was doing. Had I somehow failed her by not being more present? Should I have tried harder to maintain our connection as she grew older? These thoughts accompanied the rhythmic movement of my needle, weaving themselves into the fabric of the quilt, along with my hopes for her future. The pattern required intricate hand stitching that couldn't be rushed. I had to redo entire sections when they didn't meet my standards, determined that every aspect of this gift would be perfect. My hands often ached at the end of a long session, and I developed calluses on my fingers from the constant pressure of the needle, but I persevered. This was not just a quilt, it was a testament to 18 years of love and dedication. By month 4 of the project, I had completed the basic structure and began adding the embellishments that would make the quilt truly special. I embroidered Emily's name and birth date in one corner, added small charms and buttons that represented her interests and achievements over the years, and stitched inspirational quotes about life's journey along the borders. One particularly meaningful element was a small pocket I created on the back of the quilt, hidden but accessible. Inside this pocket, I placed a handwritten letter on fine stationery, explaining the significance of each fabric and design element, expressing my hopes for her future, and revealing the existence of the college fund I had maintained for her since birth. This letter took me days to compose, as I wanted every word to perfectly convey my love and pride. As I neared completion of the quilt, I began to experience moments of doubt. Would Emily truly appreciate the hundreds of hours of work and thought I had poured into this gift? In a world of instant gratification and material excess, would she understand the value of something made by hand with love, I pushed these concerns aside, focusing instead on finishing the project to the best of my ability. The final stage was the actual quilting, joining the decorative top layer to the backing with the batting in between, creating the distinctive stitched pattern that gives a quilt its texture and strength. For this, I chose a design of interconnected circles, symbolizing the continuous nature of family bonds and life's journey. This process alone took over a month, with each stitch placed precisely by hand. 6 months after beginning the project, I finally added the binding that would finish the edges of the quilt. As I stitched the last few inches, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment, mixed with anticipation. The finished piece was truly beautiful, even more impressive than I had envisioned when I began. The colors flowed harmoniously, the pattern was executed with precision, and the personal touches made it uniquely meaningful. It was without question the finest thing I had ever created. I carefully washed the completed quilt by hand, blocking it to perfect dimensions as it dried, then folded it with tissue paper between the layers to prevent creasing. For the presentation, I crafted a special box from archival materials, lining it with more tissue paper and adding a hand calligraphed card on top. As Emily's graduation approached, I would sometimes take out the quilt just to look at it, to run my hands over the stitches, and remind myself of all the love sewn into each one. Whatever reaction Emily might have, I knew that I had created something valuable, something that represented the best of myself and my hopes for her. Whether she fully appreciated it now or years in the future, this gift was my legacy to her, as meaningful in its way as the financial support I had been quietly providing for her education. With the quilt completed and carefully stored, I turned my attention to preparing for the graduation ceremony and celebration to follow. I bought a new dress, had my hair styled, and even splurged on a professional manicure, wanting to look my best for Emily's special day. As I made these preparations, I felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, hopeful that this milestone would mark not only Emily's transition to adulthood, but perhaps also a new chapter in our relationship. Little did I know that the carefully wrapped quilt, sitting in my guest room, would soon become the center of a moment that would change everything between us. Emily's high school graduation ceremony was held in the grand auditorium of Westfield Academy, the prestigious private school she had attended since 6th grade. The building itself spoke of privilege and tradition, with its soaring ceilings, stained glass windows, and oak-paneled walls adorned with portraits of distinguished alumni. I arrived early, dressed in a navy blue sheath dress I had purchased for the occasion, my hair freshly styled in a simple bob. The gift-wrapped box containing the quilt sat on the passenger seat of my car, too large to carry in just yet. I decided to leave it there until after the ceremony, when we would all be heading to Sarah and Jeffrey's home for the celebration. As I entered the auditorium, I scanned the rapidly filling rows for a glimpse of my sister and brother-in-law. I spotted them near the front in the special section reserved for parents of graduates. Sarah was impossible to miss in a vibrant red designer dress, her blonde hair styled in an elaborate updo, diamonds glittering at her ears and throat. Jeffrey sat beside her in what I was certain was a custom-tailored suit, checking his phone with an air of impatient importance. I made my way toward them, weaving through clusters of families in expensive attire. "Sarah, Jeffrey," I called softly as I approached. "Congratulations on the big day." Sarah looked up, her expression brightening slightly. "Hazel, you made it. Don't you look nice?" The compliment, though seemingly genuine, carried a hint of surprise that I could manage to look presentable. Jeffrey barely glanced up from his phone, offering a distracted nod in my direction. "There's not really room in this section," Sarah said, gesturing to the filled seats around them. "But I think there are still some good spots in the middle rows." "That's fine," I assured her, trying not to feel the sting of exclusion. I'll find a seat. I just wanted to say hello before the ceremony. We're having everyone back to the house afterward around 2, Sarah reminded me. Emily's friends will be there and some of our social circle. Nothing too elaborate, just catered hors d'oeuvres and champagne. Nothing too elaborate, I thought, knowing my sister's idea of a simple gathering would still be more extravagant than any party I had ever hosted. Sounds lovely. I'll be there, of course. I found a seat about halfway back in the auditorium next to an older couple who introduced themselves as the grandparents of another graduate. We chatted pleasantly while waiting for the ceremony to begin, and I found myself envying their obvious excitement and involvement in their grandchild's life. What would it have been like, I wondered, to have had that kind of relationship with Emily all these years? The ceremony itself was impressive, with speeches from distinguished faculty and graduating seniors alike. When Emily's name was called and she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, I felt a surge of pride and love that brought tears to my eyes. Despite our strained relationship in recent years, she was still my beloved niece, the closest I would ever come to having a daughter of my own. She looked beautiful in her white graduation gown, her dark hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders, her smile confident as she accepted her diploma and moved the tassel on her cap. I clapped enthusiastically, hoping she might scan the crowd and see me, but her eyes remained forward as she returned to her seat among her classmates. After the ceremony, families congregated outside on the school's manicured lawn, taking photos and offering congratulations. I hung back, watching, as Emily was surrounded by a group of friends and their parents, all air-kissing and posing for pictures. Sarah orchestrated the photo session like a magazine editor, directing people into position and examining the results on various phones with a critical eye. Eventually, I approached the group, waiting for a pause in the photography. "Congratulations, Emily," I said when I finally caught her attention. "I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Aunt Hazel," she replied, giving me a quick, perfunctory hug before turning back to her friends. "We're heading to the house soon for the party. You're coming, right?" "Of course, I wouldn't miss it." "Cool?" And with that, she was gone, swept back into her social circle, leaving me standing alone on the periphery once again. I returned to my car to retrieve the quilt, carefully balancing the large box as I made my way to my vehicle. The weight of it reminded me of all the hours, all the love that had gone into creating it. Despite Emily's lukewarm greeting, I felt a renewed sense of anticipation about giving her this gift, about the moment when she would understand the depth of my care for her. Sarah and Jeffrey's home was located in an exclusive gated community about 20 minutes from the school. Their Mediterranean-style mansion sat on a meticulously landscaped acre with a circular driveway currently filled with luxury vehicles. I parked my modest sedan on the street and carried the gift box up the winding path to the front door, which stood open to welcome the arriving guests. Inside, the house had been transformed for the celebration. Professional decorations in the school colors adorned the expansive foyer and great room, where a catering staff in crisp uniforms circulated with trays of champagne and gourmet appetizers. A professional photographer moved through the crowd, capturing candid moments of the celebration. I placed my gift on a table already laden with beautifully wrapped packages, noting with a pang that mine was the only one not wrapped in designer paper with elaborate bows. My wrapping was neat and tasteful, but clearly handmade like the gift inside. For the next hour, I circulated awkwardly among the guests, recognizing few faces besides immediate family. I accepted a glass of champagne but barely sipped it, feeling increasingly out of place among Sarah's wealthy friends, who discussed summer plans involving private islands and European villas. I noticed several glances toward my simple dress, my lack of expensive jewelry, the unspoken assessment of my status. Finally, Sarah announced that it was time for Emily to open her gifts. The guests gathered in the great room, forming a loose circle around Emily, who sat in an ornate chair that had been positioned as a sort of throne. Sarah stood beside her, ready to hand her each gift and announce who it was from. I watched as Emily unwrapped a succession of expensive presents: a laptop from her parents, a designer handbag from her godfather, a pair of diamond earrings from her maternal grandparents, gift cards in substantial denominations from various family friends. Each gift was met with appropriate exclamations of delight and gratitude, Emily playing her role perfectly as the appreciative recipient. My heart began to race as the pile of gifts dwindled and Sarah eventually reached for my box. "This one is from your Aunt Hazel," she announced with a slight inflection that seemed to prepare everyone for something less impressive than what had come before. Emily accepted the large box, looking momentarily curious about its size and weight. As she removed the lid and tissue paper, revealing the folded quilt inside, I stepped forward. "I made this for you," I said, my voice steady despite my nerves. "It's a quilt with special fabrics and symbols from throughout your life. There's a letter inside that explains all the meanings. I've been working on it for 6 months." Emily lifted the quilt partially from the box enough to see the intricate pattern and craftsmanship, but not fully unfurling it. Her expression, which had been one of polite interest, subtly shifted. I saw something flash across her face, a momentary tightening around the eyes, a slight downturn of the mouth. Disappointment. "Oh," she said, her voice flat. "A blanket. It's nice. Thanks, Aunt Hazel." She began to fold the quilt back into the box, clearly ready to move on to the next gift, when I heard her mutter to the friend seated next to her, "I can't believe it. My aunt got me a blanket, a cheap handmade blanket, when everyone else gave me things with actual value." The words, though spoken quietly, carried in the momentary lull in conversation. I felt as though I'd been physically struck, a sensation of cold washing over me from head to toe. Around us there were a few uncomfortable coughs, a rustle of movement as guests pretended not to have heard. Sarah, standing just behind Emily, gave a small laugh. "Well, you know, Hazel," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Always practical to the point of being cheap." More uncomfortable laughter rippled through the gathering. I stood frozen, the room seeming to recede around me as I processed what had just happened. All the hours, all the love, all the carefully chosen materials and meaningful details dismissed as cheap and worthless, and not just privately, but publicly, in front of a room full of people. A strange calm settled over me in that moment. The hurt was there, profound and searing, but alongside it came a clarity I hadn't expected. I saw Emily clearly, perhaps for the first time, not as the sweet child she had once been, or the thoughtful adult I had hoped she might become, but as she truly was in this moment, entitled, materialistic, incapable of recognizing the value of anything that couldn't be measured in dollars. I moved forward, my movements deliberate and controlled. Without a word, I carefully lifted the quilt from the box, where Emily had discarded it, and refolded it with precision. I placed it back in its container, secured the lid, and tucked the box under my arm. "I'm sorry the gift wasn't to your liking," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. "I'll take it back." Emily looked up, seeming startled by my action and perhaps registering for the first time the impact of her words. "Aunt Hazel, I didn't mean—" But I was already turning away, moving through the suddenly silent crowd toward the door. I heard Sarah call my name, but I didn't look back. In that moment, I had made a decision about more than just the quilt. The college fund I had nurtured for 18 years, the $75,000 that represented countless small sacrifices, would remain mine. As I walked to my car, quilt box in arms, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The obligation I had placed upon myself, the dedication to a relationship that had become increasingly one-sided, no longer bound me. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the same quiet strength that had carried me through the making of the quilt and through all the challenges of my life before this day. The drive home from Sarah's house passed in a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, and I forced myself to focus on the road, to breathe deeply and steadily. Only when I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine did I allow the first tears to come silent, but unrestrained, rolling down my cheeks and onto my carefully chosen dress. I sat there for several minutes, letting the emotion wash through me. The hurt was profound, a deep ache that seemed to reach into every corner of my being. But there was something else too, something unexpected relief. As if a burden I'd been carrying for years had finally been set down. Eventually, I gathered the quilt box and made my way inside. My small house welcomed me with its familiar comfort, the antique furnishings that had been lovingly collected over decades, the framed photographs that told the story of a life well lived, if modest by some standards. I placed the quilt box on my dining room table and opened it carefully, lifting out the creation that represented so many hours of dedication. In the soft evening light filtering through my windows, the colors seemed to glow, the intricate pattern even more beautiful than I had remembered. I spread it out across my sofa, smoothing the fabric with gentle hands, and sat beside it, reaching for the hidden pocket that contained the letter. The pages were still crisp, my handwriting flowing across the fine stationery in even lines. I began to read the words I had written with such care and hope. My dearest Emily, as you embark on this new chapter of your life, I wanted to create something that would travel with you, a tangible reminder of your journey so far, and all the love that has surrounded you since the day you were born. This quilt contains pieces of your history. The blue silk in the center square is from the dress I wore the day you were born, when I held you in my arms for the first time and promised to always be there for you. The small piece of lace near the corner comes from your christening gown. The plaid flannel was from your favorite shirt when you were 7, the one you insisted on wearing until it was so threadbare your mother finally had to throw it away, though you cried for days afterward. Do you see the piece of yellow cotton with tiny ducks? That was from the curtains in your very first bedroom. And the white satin with pearl beads. A scrap from your first communion dress. Every square, every stitch in this quilt tells a story of your life and the people who love you. But there is another gift I want to share with you today, one that has been in the making even longer than this quilt. The day you were born, I opened a special savings account in your name. Every month since then, without fail, I have contributed what I could, sometimes a little, sometimes more. Through careful investment and consistent saving, this fund has grown to $75,000. This money is for your education, for the foundation of the bright future that awaits you. I may not have been able to give you the material luxuries others have provided, but I wanted to give you something that would last, something that would help you build the life you dream of. My greatest wish is that as you go forward, you will carry with you not just the tangible gifts you have received, but also the values that make a life truly rich: kindness, gratitude, and appreciation for the effort that goes into creating something of lasting worth, whether it's a quilt, or a relationship, or a dream for the future. With all my love, your Aunt Hazel. The tears came again as I finished reading, but they were different now, cleansing somehow. I carefully refolded the letter and returned it to its hidden pocket in the quilt. Then I sat in the growing darkness, thinking about the years I had dedicated to building a fund for a child who had grown into someone incapable of appreciating its true value. Memories flooded back, moments I had perhaps willfully ignored in my determination to be the devoted aunt. Emily, at 12, returning a homemade birthday card I'd spent hours creating with a casual, "You could have just bought one, you know." Emily, at 15, rolling her eyes when I offered to teach her to knit, saying, "Nobody makes things by hand anymore." "Aunt Hazel, that's what stores are for." the way she had begun to look at my home in recent years, with barely disguised disdain for its modest furnishings and lack of modern luxuries. I had attributed these behaviors to typical teenage self-centeredness, believing that the sweet child I had once known would eventually reemerge. But Emily was 18 now, legally an adult, and her behavior at the graduation party had not been a momentary lapse, but a revelation of her true character, shaped by years in an environment that valued material wealth above all else. The college fund had been my secret gift, my way of providing for her future without influencing the person she would become. Now I saw that I had been misguided. Giving her that money now, after what I had witnessed, would not be an act of love, but of enabling. It would reinforce exactly the values I had hoped she would transcend. As the night deepened around me, I made my decision. The next morning, I would contact my bank and change the designation on the account. The money I had saved for so many years would find a new purpose, one that honored the intention behind it, while recognizing the reality of who Emily had become. When morning came, I felt a surprising sense of peace. After a simple breakfast, I called my bank and scheduled an appointment with the financial advisor who had helped me manage Emily's college fund over the years. 2 hours later, I sat across from him explaining my decision with calm resolve. "I'd like to close the educational fund I've maintained for my niece," I said, my voice steady, "and establish a scholarship fund instead, one that would help students who otherwise couldn't afford higher education." Mark, the advisor, looked at me with surprise. "That's a significant change, Ms. Williams. Are you certain about this? The account was specifically structured as a gift for your niece." "I'm certain," I replied. "Circumstances have changed. I believe this money will do more good as a scholarship fund than as a gift to someone who hasn't learned to value what she already has." We spent the next hour discussing the details, how the scholarship would be structured, what criteria would be used to select recipients, how the funds would be dispersed. By the time I left the bank, the Emily Williams Educational Fund had been transformed into the Williams Family Scholarship Fund, dedicated to supporting students pursuing degrees in healthcare, a field Emily had once expressed interest in before being steered toward business by her parents. On the drive home, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I had finally put down a burden I hadn't fully recognized I was carrying. The scholarship would help students who truly needed the support, who would appreciate the opportunity it provided. It felt right, aligned with my values, in a way that simply handing the money to Emily no longer did. I spent the afternoon working on a new knitting project. Something just for me this time, a complex shawl in shades of blue that I had been wanting to make for years, but had set aside in favor of gifts for others. The familiar rhythm of the needles was soothing, helping to center me as I prepared for the inevitable fallout from my decision. It came sooner than expected. My phone rang just after 6 that evening, Sarah's name flashing on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hazel." Sarah's voice was sharp, dispensing with any greeting. "Emily just received a call from Westridge University asking why she hadn't confirmed her enrollment deposit. Apparently they were expecting funds from her college account." "What's going on?" I set my knitting aside, choosing my words carefully. "The college fund I had established for Emily is no longer available," I said simply. "I've redirected those funds to a scholarship program instead." There was a moment of stunned silence before Sarah erupted. "You did what? How could you? That money was for Emily's education. You've been telling us for years that you were saving for her college." I acknowledged, until yesterday when Emily made it very clear that she doesn't value the things I give her, especially if they don't come with a high price tag attached. "This is about the quilt." Sarah's voice rose in disbelief. "You're punishing her because she didn't fawn over your homemade gift." My God. Hazel. She's a teenager, they say thoughtless things sometimes. It wasn't just what she said, Sarah. It was what it revealed. Emily has been raised to value things only for their monetary worth, not for the thought or care that goes into them. Giving her $75,000 now would only reinforce that mindset. I can't believe you're doing this. Sarah's voice shook with anger. After all these years to pull the rug out from under her at the last minute, do you have any idea what this will do to her plans, to her future? Emily has two parents with substantial resources, I replied calmly. I'm sure between you and Jeffrey, you can manage her tuition if that's what you choose to prioritize. That's not the point, Sarah almost shouted. You made a commitment. You can't just change your mind because your feelings got hurt at a party. I'm sorry you see it that way, I said, maintaining my composure. But my decision is final. The money has already been legally reallocated. Sarah's next words were cold and deliberate. Jeffrey will be calling you tomorrow. What you've done may very well constitute breach of promise. We're prepared to take legal action if necessary. With that, she hung up, leaving me sitting in my quiet living room, the echo of her threat hanging in the air. I should have felt frightened, perhaps, or at least anxious about the prospect of legal trouble. Instead, I felt a strange, sad clarity. This reaction, this immediate leap to threats and legal action, rather than reflection on the underlying issue, confirmed that I had made the right decision. Less than an hour later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Emily. Aunt Hazel. Her voice sounded younger, suddenly choked with tears. Mom said you canceled my college fund. Please tell me that's not true. My heart ached at the sound of her distress, but I held firm. I've reallocated the money I had been saving, I confirmed. It's now a scholarship fund for students who need financial assistance for their education. But why? She cried. Is it because of what I said about the quilt? I didn't mean it. I was just trying to be cool in front of my friends. Please, Aunt Hazel, I need that money for school. Emily, you have parents who can easily afford to send you to any university you choose, I pointed out gently. And if they choose not to, there are student loans available just like most young people use. That's not fair, she protested, her voice rising. You promised me that money. You can't just take it back because you're mad at me. I never actually promised you the money, Emily, I corrected her. It was a gift I intended to give you, but gifts should go to people who have demonstrated that they understand their value. This is about the stupid blanket, isn't it? Her tone shifted suddenly, anger replacing tears. You're ruining my future over a blanket. That's insane. The dismissive way she referred to the quilt even now only reinforced my conviction. This isn't about the quilt itself, Emily. It's about what your reaction to it revealed about your character. The money I saved was meant to help you build a future based on values I believe in: hard work, appreciation, recognizing the worth of things beyond their price tag. Right now, I don't see those values in you. You're just a bitter old woman. She spat, her true feelings emerging through her anger. Living in your little house with your little crafts, jealous of Mom and Dad and the life they've given me? Well, fine. Keep your money, I don't need it anyway. She hung up abruptly, leaving me sitting in shocked silence. The cruelty of her words stung, but beneath that sting was a sad confirmation. This was who Emily had become, or perhaps who she had been all along, while I had clung to an idealized image of her. I went to bed that night, expecting a call from Jeffrey the next day, bracing myself for legal threats, and possibly a protracted battle over the funds. But I was at peace with my decision, confident in both its moral rightness and its legal standing. The money had always been in my name, the intended gift never formalized in any binding way. Whatever came next, I would face it with the quiet dignity that had sustained me through far greater challenges than this. Jeffrey's call came precisely at 9 o'clock the next morning, as if he were scheduling a business meeting, rather than what would essentially be a family confrontation. Hazel, he began. Without preamble, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to intimidating others. Sarah has informed me of your decision regarding the college fund. I'm calling to give you an opportunity to reconsider before we're forced to take more formal action. I took a deep breath, centering myself. Good morning, Jeffrey. I appreciate your call, but my decision is final. The funds have been legally reallocated to a scholarship foundation. Let me be clear. He continued, his tone hardening. What you've done constitutes a breach of promise. You made a commitment to Emily about her education, a commitment she and her mother have relied upon in making plans for her future. That creates a legally binding obligation. I consulted with the bank's legal department yesterday before making any changes, I replied, keeping my voice calm. There was never any written agreement, no formal contract establishing the fund as Emily's property. The account has always been in my name with Emily. As a beneficiary, I could change at my discretion. That's a technicality, Jeffrey dismissed. The courts look at intention and reasonable reliance in these matters. You clearly intended the money for Emily, and we reasonably relied on your statements to that effect. If you wish to pursue legal action, that's your prerogative, I said simply. But I should now mention that the funds are now in a charitable trust with specific disbursement criteria. Reversing that would be extremely difficult, even with a court order. I heard Jeffrey inhale sharply, clearly, not accustomed to having his threats deflected so calmly. This isn't just about the legalities, Hazel. This is about family. About your relationship with your niece and your sister. Are you really willing to destroy those relationships over a momentary slight? I see it differently, I replied. This is indeed about family, about the values we uphold and the lessons we teach the next generation. Emily needs to understand that actions and words have consequences, that relationships require mutual respect to thrive. Fine. Jeffrey's voice was cold now. If that's your position, we'll proceed accordingly. But don't expect to be welcomed into our home or our lives going forward. After he hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, allowing his words to sink in. The threat of exclusion from their lives was meant to be painful, to make me reconsider. Yet what I felt was not panic or regret, but a sad recognition that these relationships had been conditional all along, based not on genuine connection, but on what I could provide, first babysitting, then gifts, and finally financial support. I spent the next few days in a strange limbo, waiting for the other shoe to drop, perhaps a formal legal letter or more angry phone calls. But none came. Instead, a week after the graduation party, there was a knock at my door on a Sunday afternoon. When I opened it, I was shocked to find Emily standing on my porch. She looked different somehow, smaller and less certain than she had at her party. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simple jeans and a t-shirt, her face bare of makeup, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. "Hi, Aunt Hazel," she said softly. "Can I come in? I think we need to talk." I hesitated only briefly before stepping aside to let her enter. As she walked past me into the living room, I noticed her eyes catch on the quilt which I had spread over the back of my sofa, unable to bring myself to pack it away, despite everything that had happened. Emily stood in the middle of my living room, seeming uncertain how to begin. I gestured to the sofa, and we both sat, the quilt a tangible presence between us. "I owe you an apology," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What I said at the party was cruel and ungrateful. I've been thinking about it ever since, and I feel terrible." I studied her face, looking for signs of sincerity versus a calculated attempt to regain access to the college fund. What I saw surprised me: genuine distress, and what appeared to be honest remorse. "Thank you for saying that," I replied carefully. "May I ask what prompted this visit? Did your parents send you?" Emily shook her head quickly. "No, they don't even know I'm here. They'd probably be furious if they knew. Dad's been talking about suing you, and Mom just cries and says you've betrayed the family." Then why are you here? I asked gently. She took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. Because I couldn't stop thinking about what you said on the phone about values and character. And then I got the rejection letter from Westridge's scholarship committee and everything just sort of fell apart. Rejection letter? I echoed, confused. Emily nodded miserably. When the financial aid office contacted us about the missing funds, I applied for one of their merit scholarships. I was sure I'd get it with my grades and extracurriculars, but they turned me down. The letter said something about how their limited funds needed to go to students who demonstrated not just academic excellence, but also community involvement and personal character. I see, I said quietly, beginning to understand where this was leading. Dad says he'll only pay for State University, not Westridge, since it's so much more expensive. He says if I want to go to Westridge, I'll need to take out loans for the difference. Her voice broke slightly. I've never had to work for anything, Aunt Hazel. I've never had a job. The thought of being thousands of dollars in debt is terrifying. Many students take out loans for their education, I pointed out. It's quite common. I know, that's the thing, she admitted, wiping at a tear that had escaped. I've been talking to my roommate from summer camp last year. She's going to community college for 2 years, before transferring to save money, and she works 20 hours a week at a coffee shop. When I told her my situation, she wasn't even sympathetic. She just said, "Welcome to the real world where the rest of us live." Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for her. Emily had been raised in a bubble of privilege insulated from the financial realities most young people face. This was likely her first encounter with actual consequences, with limitations she couldn't charm or buy her way around. That must have been difficult to hear, I acknowledged. Emily nodded, looking down at her hands. It made me think about the quilt, about how I didn't even really look at it before I dismissed it. I was so focused on the fact that it wasn't an expensive gift. Like the others, I didn't even consider what went into making it. She looked up at me, then her eyes sincere. Could I see it properly? The quilt, I mean. I'd like to understand what I was too self-centered to appreciate, Pierre. Something in my heart softened at the request. I reached for the quilt and carefully spread it between us, watching as Emily truly looked at it for the first time. Her fingers traced the intricate pattern lingering on the special fabrics incorporated into each window of the design. "This is beautiful," she breathed, genuine awe in her voice. "Did you really make this by hand, all of it? Every stitch?" I confirmed. "It took about 6 months, working several hours most days." Her eyes widened. 6 months? Just for me?" I nodded, watching as she continued to explore the quilt, discovering the small details I had incorporated, the embroidered dates, the tiny charms, the hidden symbolism in the pattern itself. "There's a letter," I said after a while, "in a hidden pocket on the back. It explains the meaning behind each special fabric and why I chose this pattern." I showed her how to access the concealed pocket watching as she carefully withdrew the folded pages. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the letter, and I saw fresh tears well in her eyes as she began to read. I gave her privacy then, moving to the kitchen to prepare tea, allowing her the space to absorb the words I had written with such hope and love months before. When I returned with 2 steaming mugs, Emily was still sitting with the letter tears streaming freely down her face. "I had no idea," she said, looking up as I set the tea on the coffee table, "about any of this, the fund, the meaning behind each piece of the quilt. How could I have been so blind, so ungrateful?" "We often don't see the value of things until we've lost them," I said gently, sitting beside her again, "or until something causes us to look with new eyes." Emily carefully refolded the letter, placing it back in its hidden pocket. "Is it really too late?" she asked, her voice small. "For the college fund, I mean." I understand if it is. I don't deserve it after how I behaved. But I wanted to ask to see if there was any way. I took a sip of my tea, considering her question carefully. The money has been legally transferred to the Scholarship Foundation, I explained. It's not simply a matter of changing my mind, and even if it were possible, I'm not sure it would be the right thing to do. Seeing her face fall, I continued. Emily, this isn't about punishing you. It's about recognizing that giving you that money now, after everything that's happened, wouldn't serve the purpose I intended when I started saving it. It wouldn't help you become the person I know you're capable of being. What kind of person is that? She asked quietly. Someone who understands the value of hard work and sacrifice. Someone who appreciates the gifts she receives, whether they come in the form of money, or time, or handmade treasures. Someone who recognizes that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold. Emily was silent for a long moment, absorbing my words. Then she asked, "Could I learn to knit or quilt? Would you teach me?" The request caught me off guard. "You want to learn to knit?" She nodded, looking almost shy. "I'd like to understand what goes into creating something by hand. Maybe if I learned how much work it is, I'd be better at appreciating the things others make." It was a small gesture, perhaps, but it felt like a significant one. A reaching across the divide that had grown between us, an attempt to understand a world of value beyond price tags. "I'd be happy to teach you," I said warmly. "We could start with something simple, like a scarf." For the next 2 hours, we sat together on my sofa as I taught Emily the basic knitting stitches. Her first attempts were clumsy, as everyone's are, but she persisted with surprising determination. As we worked, conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years. She told me about her hopes for college, her uncertainty about what to study, her growing realization that her parents' emphasis on status and wealth might not align with her own emerging values. "Mom always pushed me toward business," she confided. "She says that's where the money is. But I used to want to be a nurse, did you know that? When I was younger." "I remember," I nodded. "You had that little nurse's kit you carried everywhere when you were about 8. She looked surprised that I recalled this detail. "I'd forgotten about that. Mom got me a toy executive desk the next Christmas with a little briefcase and play laptop. I guess that was her way of steering me in a different direction." "It's not too late to pursue nursing if that's what truly interests you," I pointed out. "Many people change their educational plans once they're in college and discover their genuine passions." Emily looked thoughtful. "Maybe. It would mean standing up to Mom and Dad, though. They're pretty set on the business track." "Part of becoming an adult is learning to make your own decisions even when they disappoint the people you love," I said gently. "Your parents want what they think is best for you, but ultimately, it's your life to shape." As the afternoon light began to fade, Emily reluctantly gathered her things to leave. At the door, she turned to me with a serious expression. "I understand why you did what you did with the college fund," she said. "I don't like it, but I understand it. And maybe it's what I needed. A wake-up call." She hugged me, then a real hug, not the perfunctory embrace she had offered at graduation. "Thank you for not giving up on me completely," she whispered, "even after how awful I was." As I watched her drive away, I felt a cautious hope stir within me. The entitled girl who had dismissed my gift so carelessly seemed to be giving way to someone more thoughtful, more aware. Whether this change would last remained to be seen, but it was a beginning. A small seed that might, with proper nurturing, grow into something beautiful. The college fund was gone, redirected to help others who would truly appreciate the opportunity it provided. But perhaps something more valuable had been salvaged, the possibility of a genuine relationship between us based not on financial obligation, but on mutual respect and understanding. Only time would tell. The months following Emily's unexpected visit brought changes I could never have anticipated. True to her word, Emily began coming to my house once a week for knitting lessons. These sessions gradually expanded into longer visits with conversations that grew increasingly open and meaningful as the barriers between us slowly dissolved. I learned that Emily had indeed enrolled at the state university, moving into a dormitory, rather than the luxury apartment her parents had initially suggested. She had also, to my surprise, taken a part-time job at a campus coffee shop, her first experience with actual employment. "The first week was awful," she admitted during one of our sessions, her fingers now deftly managing the knitting needles she had once struggled with. "I kept messing up orders and burning myself on the espresso machine. I came home crying every night, wondering why everything had to be so hard." "And now?" I prompted, noting the small smile that played around her lips. "Now I kind of love it," she confessed. "I've made friends with the other baristas. Real friends, not like the crowd I hung out with in high school, where everyone was always competing over who had the most expensive everything. And there's something satisfying about earning my own money, even if it's not much." As autumn progressed into winter, I noticed subtle changes in Emily's appearance and demeanor. The designer clothes gave way to simpler attire, her once elaborate hairstyle replaced by a practical cut she maintained herself. She spoke less about material possessions and more about experiences, ideas, the people she was meeting at school. One snowy December evening, Emily arrived for our weekly session with an unusual request. "Aunt Hazel, would you tell me more about the Scholarship Foundation? The one you created with what would have been my college fund." I set aside my knitting, surprised by her interest. "Of course, it's called the Williams Family Scholarship Fund. It provides financial assistance to students pursuing degrees in healthcare with an emphasis on nursing programs." "Nursing specifically?" Emily asked, her interest clearly piqued. I nodded. "That was intentional. I remembered your childhood interest in becoming a nurse before Sarah steered you toward business. It seemed fitting somehow." Emily was quiet for a moment, then asked hesitantly, "How many students does it help?" "The fund generates enough interest to provide partial scholarships for 3 students each year," I explained. "The recipients are selected based on academic promise, financial need, and demonstrated character, particularly a commitment to service." Would it be possible for me to meet them someday? The scholarship recipients, I mean." The request touched me deeply. "I think that could be arranged if they're comfortable with it. May I ask why you're interested?" Emily set down her knitting, choosing her words carefully. "I've been thinking a lot about purpose lately, about what I want to do with my life. Business classes are fine, but they don't excite me. But when I walk past the nursing building on campus, I feel this pull." My heart quickened at her words, hearing in them an echo of the little girl who had once proudly carried a toy medical kit everywhere she went. "Are you considering a change in your major?" She nodded, looking both nervous and determined. "I've already talked to an academic advisor about what it would take to transfer into the nursing program next semester. My science prerequisites are strong enough, but I'd be starting the specific nursing coursework a semester behind." "How do your parents feel about this, Tom?" I asked gently, knowing Sarah and Jeffrey's views on careers they considered appropriately prestigious. Emily grimaced slightly. "I haven't told them yet. Dad will be disappointed, but he might come around. Mom, though, she has very specific ideas about acceptable career paths for people like us, as she puts it." "It takes courage to choose your own path," I acknowledged, "especially when it means disappointing people you love. But in the end, it's your life to live, not theirs." Our conversation that evening marked another turning point in Emily's journey. In the weeks that followed, she formally applied to transfer into the nursing program, was accepted, and finally gathered the courage to inform her parents of her decision. Sarah's reaction was predictably negative, involving tears, accusations of wasting potential, and dire predictions about future regrets. Jeffrey surprisingly proved more supportive, after his initial disappointment, perhaps recognizing in his daughter's determination a strength of character he could respect. The tension between Emily and her mother resulted in Emily moving out of the family home where she had been living while attending State University, taking a small apartment near campus with a roommate from her coffee shop job. The space was modest by any standard, but Emily seemed happier there than she had been in the luxury of her parents' home. "It's the first time I've felt like the space around me is truly mine," she told me during a video call showing off her new apartment. "Not fancy, not perfect, but authentic. Does that make sense?" It made perfect sense to me. In her own way, Emily was discovering what I had known for years, that authenticity trumps perfection, that a life built around genuine values brings a satisfaction that material excess never can. As spring arrived, bringing with it Emily's first semester in the nursing program, I received an unexpected call from Sarah. We had barely spoken since the fallout over the college fund, our interactions limited to tense exchanges at unavoidable family gatherings. "Hazel," she began, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge, "I was wondering if we could meet for coffee sometime this week, just the two of us." Surprised but cautiously optimistic, I agreed to meet her at a cafe midway between our homes. When the day arrived, I found Sarah already seated at an outdoor table, looking somewhat diminished from the confident, stylish woman who had orchestrated Emily's graduation party nearly a year before. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat across from her. "I know things have been strained between us." "That's putting it mildly," I acknowledged with a small smile, trying to ease the tension. Sarah looked down at her untouched coffee. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about Emily, about our family, about the values Jeffrey and I have emphasized." She sighed deeply. "It's not easy to admit when you might have been wrong about something fundamental." "Wrong about what specifically?" I asked gently. "About what truly matters," Sarah replied, meeting my eyes directly for perhaps the first time in years. "About the kind of mother I've been, the kind of person I've encouraged Emily to become." She paused, seeming to gather her courage. "I see her now working her way through school, pursuing this nursing degree because it genuinely calls to her, and she seems happier, more grounded than I've seen her in years." "She's finding her own path," I offered. "That's what young adulthood is for." Sarah nodded slowly. "I always thought I was giving her the best of everything, the best schools, clothes, opportunities. But watching her now, I wonder if all those best things were actually obstacles to her finding what really matters to her." The admission clearly cost her pride, giving way to a mother's concern for her daughter's genuine well-being. We talked for over 2 hours that day, really talked in a way we hadn't since we were young girls ourselves. Sarah shared her fears about losing status among her social circle if Emily pursued an ordinary career, her worries that she had emphasized material success at the expense of deeper values. "I owe you an apology," she said as our meeting drew to a close, "for how I reacted at the graduation party, for the things Jeffrey and I said afterward. You were right about the college fund. Emily wasn't ready for that kind of gift. She needed to learn some hard lessons first." "We all want what's best for her," I replied, reaching across the table to squeeze my sister's hand. "We just had different ideas about what that meant." Our reconciliation was tentative at first, years of competitive tension, not easily dissolved. But over the following months, Sarah made genuine efforts to support Emily's new direction, even attending a nursing school information session with her daughter to better understand the profession Emily had chosen. Jeffrey, too, showed unexpected growth. After initial resistance to Emily's more modest lifestyle, he found a way to support her that honored her independence while acknowledging his desire to help. Rather than simply paying her tuition directly, he established a matching program for every dollar Emily earned at her job. He would contribute an equivalent amount toward her education up to a certain limit. It's his way of respecting that I want to contribute to my own education, Emily explained to me, while still being the provider he's always seen himself as, a compromise we can both live with. As Emily completed her first year in the nursing program, maintaining excellent grades despite the program's rigor, I received another unexpected request. She asked if she could bring her academic advisor to meet me and learn more about the Williams Family Scholarship Fund. Professor Jenkins works with the scholarship committee, Emily explained. When I told her the story of our family scholarship, she was really interested. She thinks there might be a way for me to get involved with it, maybe even help select future recipients. The meeting proved to be yet another turning point. Professor Jenkins, an experienced nurse educator with a warm, practical manner, immediately grasped the potential for meaningful connection between Emily and the scholarship program. Many of our scholarship donors remain anonymous, she explained, but there's something powerful about creating a personal link between the source of support and those who benefit from it. Emily's unique perspective, having come to nursing after initially pursuing a different path, could be invaluable in the selection process. And so, in an outcome I could never have predicted, when I redirected the college fund, Emily became a student representative on the Scholarship Selection Committee. The following fall, she met the 3 students who received support from the Williams Family Scholarship, sharing with them not only congratulations, but also her own evolving story of discovering what truly mattered to her. One afternoon, nearly 2 years after the graduation party that had changed everything, Emily arrived at my house carrying a carefully wrapped package. "I have something for you," she said, a mix of nervousness and pride in her voice. "It's not perfect, but I wanted you to have it." Inside, the wrapping was a hand-knitted shawl in shades of soft green and blue. The stitches were mostly, even the pattern, simple but effectively executed, showing how far she had come from those first awkward attempts at knitting. "It's my first completed project," she explained, watching anxiously as I examined it. "I wanted you to have it because, well, because you taught me that the most valuable gifts aren't the ones with the highest price tag, but the ones that carry meaning and effort and love." Tears filled my eyes as I wrapped the shawl around my shoulders, feeling the love woven into each stitch. "It's beautiful, Emily. Absolutely perfect in every way that matters." She smiled, relief and happiness lighting her face. "I've been thinking about the quilt you made me, the one I was too foolish to appreciate. Do you still have it?" I nodded. The quilt had remained in my spare room, carefully stored, but never displayed a bittersweet reminder of both love and disappointment. "Would it be possible? Would you consider letting me have it now? I think I'm finally ready to understand what it really means." Without a word, I went to the closet where the quilt had been stored and brought it out, still wrapped in its protective covering. I placed it in Emily's arms, watching as she cradled it with a reverence that had been entirely absent when she first received it. "I'll treasure it always," she promised, her eyes shining with sincerity. "And someday, I hope to pass it on to my own children, along with the story of how their great-aunt's wisdom helped their mother become the person she was meant to be." As I write this now, Emily is preparing to graduate from nursing school next month. The entitled girl who once dismissed a handmade gift as cheap has become a compassionate young woman who understands the true value of things that cannot be purchased: integrity, purpose, genuine connection. She works part-time at a community health clinic, already putting her developing skills to use, serving those in need. The $75,000 that would have been her college fund has now helped multiple nursing students achieve their dreams, creating a ripple effect of positive impact that extends far beyond what I could have imagined when I first began saving all those years ago. And our family, once fractured by materialism and misunderstanding, has found its way to a new kind of connection, one based on authentic values rather than appearances. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give is not what someone wants, but what they need. For Emily, that wasn't money or material support, but the opportunity to discover her own strength, to find her way, without the cushion of privilege that had insulated her from growth. By refusing to enable the entitled behavior she had developed, I gave her the chance to become someone far stronger and more authentic than she might otherwise have been. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision out of love, one that wasn't understood or appreciated at the time? Or perhaps you've been on the receiving end of such a decision, only recognizing its value years later. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please consider liking this video, subscribing to hear more life experiences, and sharing with someone who might need this perspective today. Sometimes the hardest lessons become our greatest blessings, and recognizing the true value of what we give and receive can transform not just our relationships, but our entire lives. Thank you for listening, and remember that love sometimes means having the courage to say no when saying yes would be easier, but ultimately harmful.